My name is Vivian Hollis, and the last time I was invited to my family's retreat, I was the one grilling lunch while they posed for the group photo, without me. At 31, I thought I had come to peace with being the outlier, the daughter with the New York zip code, the messy hair, the inconvenient opinions. But nothing prepared me for the moment my mother leaned into a Zoom screen and said, with a porcelain smile, "Sorry, sweetheart, there just isn't enough room this year." Not enough room? Not after I funded the sweatshirts. Not after I drove 3 hours in the rain last year just to be forgotten in the dinner toast. Not after all the times I held my breath, bit my tongue, and told myself, maybe next time. But there would be no next time, because this time I didn't beg for space. I built it. Before I tell you how I turned exile into invitation and why my family's legacy is now being rewritten in wildflowers and firelight, leave a comment if you've ever been left out by the very people who should have held you close, and if you've ever had to make your own belonging from scratch. This story is yours too. I blinked at the screen, stunned into silence. The Zoom call was supposed to be a casual Friday night check-in, a routine we hadn't followed in months. But apparently, tonight had a specific purpose. Behind my mother's tight smile and pearl earrings, I could see the familiar tan of the living room walls in the Hollis house. Home. Or at least, what used to be home. My father, Charles, sat beside her, scrolling on his phone, not even pretending to care. "We've decided to keep the Vermont cabin a little more intimate this year," Linda continued, sipping her tea. "Just immediate family." "I am immediate family," I said, voice tighter than I intended. "Oh, honey," Brittany chimed in from another square on the screen. Her hair was pulled into a perfect bun, and her voice was all softness and mediation. "You live in New York. You're always busy." I gave a hollow laugh. "So does that mean I'm less of a daughter?" Silence. It was Nora who didn't say anything at all. Her face was muted, posture withdrawn. Classic Nora. Always silent when it mattered. Linda smoothed a hand over her blouse. "There are only so many rooms at the cabin, Vivian. We didn't want to crowd things. It's nothing personal." But it was personal. My mind spun through the effort I'd poured into past retreats. The year I designed the family crest for the camp hoodies. The time I secured a wine sponsorship through a friend in Napa. The way I manned the kitchen grill while the others posed for family photos I was conveniently never called in for. They said it wasn't personal, but somehow I was always the one who ended up outside the frame. I muted myself before I could speak. Sat there staring at the screen while they kept chatting. Nora asking whether there'd be board games again this year, Brittany offering to bring her famous lemon bars. I unmuted, finally. "So you emailed them but not me?" "Oh no," Linda said, as if the idea of excluding me had never crossed her mind. "We must have forgotten." I swallowed down the bitterness crawling up my throat. "Right. I mean, don't make this a bigger deal than it is," she added, her voice just a little too clipped. "We're just trying to keep things simple this time." Simple. That word again. I wanted to scream, but instead I nodded once, slowly, and clicked the little red square in the corner. The screen went black. The living room fell into silence. Not their living room. Mine. The tiny one-bedroom I'd carved out in Queens, filled with furniture I'd built with my own 2 hands. The only place no one could kick me out of. I sat there in the dark for a moment, then opened my laptop again. Not Zoom, not email. Google Earth. Vermont. The map loaded slowly, pixels shaping forests, valleys, winding roads I'd driven 100 times. I zoomed in on the lake where we used to kayak. On the clearing behind the Hollis family cabin, found the edge of the woods. Clicked, add pin. They said there's no room? Okay. I once saw a framed handwritten letter from my grandmother hanging in the retreat living room, but one line was hidden by the frame. Even if we disagree, invite each other back every year. I closed the cab door with a thud, the Brooklyn chill biting at my cheeks. My boots echoed down the cracked sidewalk as I made my way toward the rust-red door of my studio. It wasn't much, barely 800 square feet, but it was mine. Every inch. No committees, no approval needed, no sisters hijacking the narrative. The overhead light in the hallway was out again, so I fumbled in the dark for the key. My fingers grazed the lip of the wooden mailbox bolted beside the door, a relic from the building's past. The thing barely held junk flyers anymore. But tonight, something was tucked inside. Yellowed edges, folded neat. Inside, I clicked on the overhead lamp and shut out the city noise behind me. The envelope was unmarked. Just my name in my grandmother's looping script. My heart stuttered. I slid it open slowly. Inside was a photocopy. Familiar handwriting spilled across the page, flourished, ink smudged in places. My grandmother's letter, the one she'd written for the very first Hollis family retreat, back in 1998. I could almost hear her voice again, soft, certain, reading it aloud that summer as we sat on plaid cushions in a circle. I was 9, too young to understand half the words, but old enough to memorize the look in her eyes when she said them. I held the page up to the light. The bottom line, the one always hidden by the frame, came into view. Even if we disagree, invite each other back every year. My throat tightened. I sat on the edge of my futon, phone in one hand, the letter in the other. Carefully, I spread the paper flat on the table and took a picture, framing the full text this time. No cropping, no selective memory. The flash caught on a faded crease across the last sentence. I zoomed in. Right under her signature, scrawled in an afterthought curve, it read, "No child should be told they don't belong." I didn't cry. I thought I might. But something else settled instead. A quiet, iron certainty in my chest. The door opened behind me. Monica breezed in, a bag of takeout in one hand, keys jangling in the other. "I brought dumplings and therapy," she announced, kicking the door closed. "Preferably in that order." She took one look at my face and dropped the sarcasm. "Okay, so what happened?" I held up the letter. She leaned over my shoulder, reading fast, then slower. "That's... wow." Her eyes met mine. "This your grandma's?" I nodded. "From the first retreat." "Was this the one they framed?" "The same one," I said. "Except they hid the last line." Monica exhaled sharply. Classic Hollis move. Sentimental on the surface, quietly savage underneath. I laughed. Bitter, but real. She tilted her head. "So, what are you going to do with that?" I looked down at the paper. My grandmother's words felt like a map. I met Monica's eyes. "I'm going to build a retreat they can't ignore. I want wildflowers, a circle of chairs, and a fire pit where truth has no curfew." The sentence came out before I even realized I'd said it aloud. Monica blinked at me, then burst into a crooked smile. "Well, damn, Vivian. I was gonna suggest beanbags and beer pong, but I guess you're going for sacred healing, huh?" The map of Vermont was still spread out on the kitchen table, creased from the number of times I'd folded and unfolded it, tracing routes with my finger. My grandmother's letter rested beside it, like a silent compass. I'd highlighted the line, "Even if we disagree, invite each other back every year." It stayed with me, not just in memory, but in blood. We packed our bags before sunrise. The rental car's heater coughed and moaned as we drove through New England frost, the roads narrowing the deeper we got into rural Vermont. Monica hummed to a playlist she'd built called Build a Retreat, mostly Florence Welch and angry indie women. I was quiet. My thoughts were louder. When we pulled up to the edge of the lake, I didn't exhale. The house was weathered. A single-story structure with warped siding and shutterless windows, graying under years of neglect. Moss clung to the edges like it didn't want to let go. Yet, something about it felt like potential. Not warmth, but permission. Mr. Grayson met us with a thermos of black coffee and a slight limp. He was older than I'd expected. Gray beard, flannel coat, the kind of hands that looked like they'd built cabins and held secrets. He gave the place a sweeping look before turning to me. "People usually want polished," he said. "You want truth. That's rare." I swallowed. "Is that a yes?" He nodded toward the porch. "Come on, I'll show you the bones." Inside, dust danced in the air like the place had been holding its breath. The living room sagged on one side. The kitchen smelled faintly of mildew. Yet every flaw only made me more certain. This wasn't a place to pretend. It was a place to start over. "There's history here," Grayson said, leaning against the doorframe. "After the war, the land was used to hold people displaced by conflict. Refugees mostly. It was meant to be temporary. But pain always lingers longer than welcome signs." That made me pause. Pain lingering. It sounded like my family. The ones who smiled through betrayal and used politeness like a mask. Monica knelt by the cracked fireplace. This could be something. Neutral colors, linen curtains, open beams, a fire pit out back, maybe a garden path. Nothing showy, just light. I felt something shift inside me. Not just ambition, direction. We walked the perimeter. Trees wrapped the house like a quiet promise. The lake glimmered cold but unthreatening. The silence didn't scare me. It invited. Grayson stopped at the front steps. "If you're serious," he said, pulling a key from his coat pocket, "it's yours. Just don't turn it into another postcard perfect lie." I nodded slowly, taking the key. It was heavier than I expected. As I turned it over, I saw the engraving along its side, faded but legible. "Welcome home." Nora has never opposed her parents, but she has never looked me in the eye as the retreat approaches. I stared at her latest post for a long time. The image was a soft filtered shot of a picnic table set beneath a birch tree. Red checkered cloth, mason jars, folded napkins. The caption read, "Some traditions don't need to change. Counting down to Vermont with my favorite people." Grateful, Shaw family first. There were two things missing. One, my name. Two, the truth. I didn't like to spy, but the tags were visible. Brittany, our parents, even Brittany's golden retriever had its own handle now. But not me. My thumb hovered over the screen for a few seconds longer than it should have. Then I locked my phone and turned back to the camera. It was early. The kind of early that paints the windows gray-blue and makes every noise sound like it might echo forever. Monica was asleep in the other room. The studio was still. Still enough to record. I took a breath and hit record. "This isn't a retreat for people who need to be perfect," I said, my voice quieter than I expected. "It's for the ones who've been left out of the photo, who stayed late to clean up and got cropped out anyway." Outside, the sun began inching across the window. My camera caught it, catching on the edge of a daffodil we'd planted 2 days ago in an old ceramic mug. I'd arranged the shot just right. Time-lapse was already rolling. In 10 seconds, the bloom would look like it had opened for me. I kept going. This is for anyone who was told they were too much or not enough, who heard "we forgot" too many times to believe it. I didn't cry. That was important. No pity. After finishing, I uploaded the footage to my editor and let it process. The render bar crawled. I made coffee, added oat milk, stirred clockwise. The way Grandma used to say was good luck. I sat back down and opened my texts. Nora's name sat at the top of my screen. No new messages. I clicked into our thread. 2 days ago, I'd sent her a private invitation. Not dramatic, not bitter. Just a picture of the lake house porch and the caption, "There's a chair for you if you want it." Blank space after that. No pressure, no guilt, no reply. Now she was writing essays about togetherness on social media, acting like I hadn't cried with her on the phone the night she got rejected from Columbia, like I hadn't ghostwritten half her college essay on resilience. The hypocrisy burned, but not enough to make me lash out. Not yet. Instead, I picked up my phone and watched the sunrise through my own lens. Real light, real silence, no filters. I posted the video from earlier with a caption, "Building something different." The likes were few, but that wasn't the point. The text came in 3 hours later. "Nora, you know this will only make things worse." I stared at the message, heart slowing. So that was her choice. To say nothing when I was excluded, and now to caution me against claiming space. Not a call. Not even a "Viv, can we talk?" Just a warning, like I was the one creating damage. I didn't answer right away. I reread the message, thought about the letter from Grandma, thought about last year when I brought Nora tea after she'd had a panic attack on day 2 of the retreat, and no one else even noticed. Then I started typing. Worse for who? No one asks for forgiveness. But sometimes sending an invitation is the only way to keep yourself from becoming like them. The glow from my laptop cast long shadows across the studio walls. Outside, the streetlights hummed and flickered, washing the windows in an amber tint that felt neither warm nor cold. Just suspended. Like the moment before a choice gets made. I hadn't slept much. The weight of the message from Nora still lingered in the pit of my stomach. But instead of curling inward, it gave me a strange kind of clarity. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about making anyone grovel or admit wrongdoing. It was about air. Real air. The kind you could breathe without choking on old conversations. The Haven retreat site had taken weeks to build. Monica helped with the formatting and color scheme. All calming tones, clean lines, photographs we'd taken ourselves of soft grass and stones, and morning fog over the lake. But tonight, it felt like the final piece was about to click into place. I sat cross-legged in front of the screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard. On the homepage, I uploaded the video, the one that opened with my grandmother's voice. I dug through an old cassette and converted it myself. Her words cracked a little from age but held firm. No child should be told they don't belong. It faded into a still image of the lake house. Then my voice picked up. The Haven isn't a place for escape. It's a space for truth. For remembering that love, without inclusion, is just performance. I kept it simple. 90 seconds. No dramatic music. No slow fades to black. Just truth. Spoken plainly. That was the whole point. I read the copy again. Then once more. Underneath the video, the RSVP box sat quietly. Name, email, a simple checkbox. I believe in presence without conditions. That's all. No bio, no reference, no hierarchy. Monica leaned over the back of the couch, sipping tea, her expression unreadable. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "Yeah. If I overthink it now, I'll never do it." She didn't press, just sat beside me, quiet and solid. I opened my email, created a new message. Subject, Spring Retreat. The Haven recipients. Mom, Dad, Brittany, Nora. I wrote 3 lines. "Hi. This spring, I'm hosting a retreat in Vermont. If you'd like to come, there's space. Always." Attached. The link. No guilt, no corrections, no reminders of what they did. Just the invitation. Clean, direct, whole. I hovered over the send button longer than I'd like to admit. My heart wasn't racing, but it was awake. Like it knew this was one of those moments I wouldn't be able to take back. Click. The screen refreshed. Message sent. I sat back, breathing through the silence. There was no ping, no read receipt, no magical sign. That wasn't the point. I didn't need them to answer right away, or ever. I needed them to know I'd chosen a different road, one that didn't involve forgetting, but also didn't involve cruelty. Monica reached out and squeezed my hand once, then got up and left me alone with the stillness. I stared at the homepage one last time, then closed the laptop. The next morning, I opened Instagram. At the top of my feed was Brittany's story. A picture of fresh tulips in a mason jar, captioned, "This spring, our family celebrates truth. Only those who deserve it will be present. No tags, no names, just venom dressed as virtue." The hardest part isn't rebuilding, it's undoing the things that made you believe you weren't good enough. I pressed my foot against the shovel and felt the earth resist me, stiff and cold from a winter that still hadn't fully let go. Beneath the thaw, the ground clung to its frost like a habit. And yet, there I was, breaking it open, one strike at a time. No one had replied. Not my parents, not Brittany, not Nora. The silence was louder than any argument, but I didn't let it root itself inside me. I kept digging. Monica crouched nearby, sleeves rolled up, sorting wooden planks for the walkway. Her breath puffed into the air in soft bursts, and she sang under her breath, something upbeat and slightly off-key. The melody didn't matter. The rhythm did. It kept us moving. Grayson showed up with coffee and a toolbox. "You two are either brave or delusional," he said, watching the wind push at our half-assembled tent like it had a grudge. "But you've got the stubbornness of pioneers, so I'll stay." I grinned, sweat clinging to my spine under the hoodie. "You said healing was rebellion, right?" He looked out at the lake. "Still is." Around noon, my phone buzzed in my back pocket. I checked it, expecting maybe a weather alert. Instead, one name stared back at me like a memory I hadn't unpacked in years. Leah. "Still need someone to write about your truth?" I blinked. We hadn't spoken in almost 4 years. She'd been a journalist then. Real stories, real grit. Then came the layoffs, the corporate mergers, the shift to branded content. Last I heard, she was ghostwriting for a wellness brand she couldn't pronounce. But she was also one of the first people to ever ask me, "So what's your story, Viv?" I texted back, "Only if you're still good with muddy boots and raw facts." 3 dots pulsed, then disappeared. A few minutes later, "Send me the address. No filters, right?" I smiled. The shovel felt lighter after that. Later that afternoon, we hammered the baseboards into place along the garden trail. Monica measured twice, cursed once, and finally declared victory with a triumphant fist pump. The sky was heavy with clouds, but the air had warmed just enough to let the scent of thawing soil rise. Grayson sat on a folding chair nearby, eyes closed like he could smell the past. "In 1946, he began, "there was a camp here. Not the retreat kind, a holding place, for people no one knew what to do with." Monica paused mid-hammer. Grayson continued, "Displaced families, widows, kids too shell-shocked to speak. They built bonfires at night, told stories without language. That's how they healed. Not with therapy, with space to exist." He opened his eyes. "Don't forget that. You're not just planting flowers. You're making room." The wind picked up. I picked up a marker and approached a reclaimed wooden signboard we'd salvaged from the shed. In slow strokes I wrote, "Truth needs no invitation." The letters bled a little from the grain. It didn't matter. That made it feel lived in. I was placing it along the edge of the new walkway when the first raindrop landed on my cheek. Then another. Then many. We scrambled. Monica grabbed the tarp. Grayson barked something about stakes, but the tent had never been secure. The poles wobbled, then gave. The canvas collapsed inward with a wet, reluctant sigh. We stood in the downpour, soaked and breathless, but the walkway held. The earth, though pounded by rain, didn't cave. No sinkholes, no erosion, just water running off into the lake like it had somewhere to go. I laughed. A deep, quiet kind of laugh. Not because it was funny, because it was enough. The ground was holding. Later that evening, after we changed into dry clothes and reheated some soup, I checked my phone again. A new message from Leah. One photo. It was the draft of her article. Headline bold across the top. The retreat that welcomes the uninvited. I was only going to post a video. I didn't expect it to reach Brittany. The sun rose over Haven like it was unveiling something sacred. Thin threads of gold slipped through the unfinished archway Monica and I had built the day before, illuminating the sign that still stood firm despite the rain. Truth needs no invitation. It was the first morning that smelled like spring, and the first morning I didn't feel like I was pretending to be okay. I set my phone on a tree stump, hit record, and walked slowly toward the camera. My hands were streaked with dried mud, hair tied back, smile unfiltered. I let the silence hold for a moment before speaking. Day 5, I said. Still no RSVP from my family, but this place is real, and I'm here. I paused, knelt beside a patch of damp soil, and started planting wildflower seeds as I continued. Haven isn't for revenge, it's for remembering what belonging is supposed to feel like. Monica, behind the camera, gave a subtle thumbs up as I stood, dusted off my knees, and ended the clip with a laugh I didn't force. Back inside, I edited for less than an hour. No background music this time, just the sound of the wind and birds and one voice, speaking like no one had ever interrupted it. I posted the video to Instagram and YouTube. Day 5 at Haven. Building, planting, being. Then I forgot about it. Until Leah texted me 3 hours later. Holy hell. 40,000 views in one day. I blinked, then opened her Substack. She'd embedded the video with a short write-up. Sometimes, healing is just refusing to be erased. Simple, true, and apparently shareable. The comments were pouring in. Strangers from Boston, Montana, overseas. One said, "I wish my family had this. Thank you for showing it's possible." I pinned that one. Then came the shares. Hundreds. Teachers, therapists, old friends I hadn't heard from in years. Some just sent the leaf emoji leaf. I didn't know what it meant at first. Then I saw it in my messages. Nora. No words. No apology. Just the emoji. A single green sprout in the middle of white space. I stared at it for a long time, wondering what it meant. Hope? Regret? Quiet guilt? Before I could reply, another notification popped up. Brittany. Her story opened with a boomerang of champagne glasses clinking. Caption: We don't need knockoffs mimicking our legacy. Real retreats only. No names, no tags. But her tone was unmistakable. She always knew how to wrap venom in velvet. I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because the video kept growing, shared into healing circles, book clubs, recovery forums. Strangers began messaging me, not with pity, but with solidarity. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't just shouting into an empty forest. I was building something that could echo back. At lunch, Monica brought sandwiches and grinned. You realize you just soft-launched a movement, right? I rolled my eyes. Don't jinx it. But she wasn't wrong. That night, I sat under the half-constructed porch with my laptop, refreshing the comment feed. And there, at the very top, still pinned, "Wish my family had this." It said everything I'd ever felt. Everything I'd never been able to say. Then the email came. No subject line, just the sender. Linda Hollis. I hesitated, then clicked. You're making things unnecessarily difficult. Stop this. That was it. No dear, no love. Just a demand to disappear again, dressed in lowercase courtesy. I closed the laptop and stared out into the woods, where the path I was carving grew a little clearer with every step I refused to take back. They draw the line with invitations. I draw the line with mossy lawns and a circle of benches. I trace the edge of the moss with my fingers, green and soft like old velvet. Spring had crept in slowly, shyly, but now the ground around Haven was dotted with new life. Wild fern, dandelion bursts, and patches of bright moss where the light settled gently. Grayson said it reminded him of Ireland. I told him it reminded me of forgiveness. We had just finished arranging the benches in a wide ring beneath the old pine trees. 6 wooden benches, sanded and sealed by Monica over the past week, now formed what I called the Circle of Story. No podium, no microphones, just space, eye level, shoulder to shoulder. A place to speak, and more importantly, to be heard. I hung a hand-lettered sign from the archway. Come as you are. Monica stepped back, arms crossed, and nodded. If Brittany saw this, she'd combust. I didn't laugh. I just said, she'll see it. Do you want me to get security? Monica asked, only half joking. Just in case your family decides to turn this into a reality show stunt? I don't think they will, I replied. They don't believe I'm real enough to crash. Grayson walked over carrying 2 metal lanterns and handed one to me. Light guides truth better than warnings ever will, he said simply. By noon, the first guests arrived. A woman in her mid-30s stepped out of a rideshare van. She looked around nervously, clutching a frayed canvas tote. Her daughter, maybe 7 or 8, peeked out from behind her with wide eyes. Welcome, I said, offering my hand. I'm Vivian. She exhaled. Melissa, this is June. Thank you for coming. Melissa smiled weakly. I wasn't sure we should, but when I read what you wrote, I just felt like, maybe. That's all it takes, I said. Maybe is enough. A few hours later, another car pulled in. A woman in a pressed white coat stepped out carrying a small suitcase. Her name tag still hung on her pocket. Dr. May Lin. She walked up with the calm poise of someone used to being ignored in rooms she'd saved. I used to host dinners for my husband's family, she said softly. Then I filed for divorce. Suddenly, I was ungrateful. Your retreat. It felt like a door I didn't have to knock on. I guided her to the cabin we'd set up for guests. No knocking needed. This place is already yours. That evening, while I adjusted the chairs and Monica tested the lighting with her phone, my inbox pinged. Subject: Coming? From Nora Hollis. Can I come? I'll bring tea. No apologies, no explanation. Just that. My hands trembled a little. Monica leaned over my shoulder, read it, and said nothing. Just squeezed my arm. I replied with the address and a single word. Yes. 3 hours later, a car rolled in quietly. Nora stepped out, clutching a paper bag of tea sachets like it was a peace offering. She didn't speak. I didn't either. She walked up, paused, then wrapped her arms around me and held on for what felt like years. No words passed between us. Just warmth. Just breathe. I still don't know where I stand, she finally whispered. You don't have to, I murmured back. You're here. That night, the campfire flickered to life in the circle of story. Melissa sang a lullaby. Dr. Lin roasted marshmallows with June. Grayson hummed something wordless. I looked at the flames, then my phone. Notifications again. Brittany had posted a video. The caption read, "Behind the scenes of this year's Real Family Retreat, Legacy Edition." It was glossy, polished, sweeping drone shots, catered spreads, matching outfits. She even mimicked my sign with one of her own: truth, tradition, togetherness. But it was empty. All shine, no soil. I watched it once, then put the phone down. Outside, the moss beneath my feet was soft, the circle glowed, the tea was steeping. And for the first time in years, I didn't care what they thought, because I wasn't building this for them. ChatGPT John Noy. At their retreat, there's a buffet. At mine, someone cries because they've been told the truth for the first time without being interrupted. The fire crackled like it had a voice of its own, sharp and alive, sending up sparks that danced against the night sky. Around the ring of benches, 8 people sat close together, not for warmth, but for courage. Some held steaming cups of tea. Others clasped their knees. One man stared into the flames as if waiting for permission to speak. I held my grandmother's letter in both hands, the paper worn, corners soft from decades of folding. I cleared my throat, let the quiet grow deep, then read aloud. Truth is not about being right. It is about being real. And if you ever find yourself surrounded by silence instead of love, that is not family. That is something else. When I looked up, Monica's eyes were glossy. Dr. Lynn was dabbing her cheek with a napkin. Melissa leaned forward, elbows on knees, her daughter fast asleep beside her. I used to think speaking out made me selfish, said one guest, an older man in flannel with knotted fingers. Turns out staying quiet did more damage. Another woman nodded slowly. I was told for years I was too sensitive. This is the first time I've spoken without being corrected mid-sentence. They weren't guests anymore. They were the retreat. The firelight made everyone glow gold and soft. In the distance, the lake whispered, and then my phone buzzed. It was Nora. She held the phone up so I could see Brittany on FaceTime. The screen was lit like a production set, crystal clear lighting, white tablecloths, champagne and flutes. "She's tarnishing the family," Brittany snapped. "She's taking our name and warping it into some pitiful circus act. You need to talk to her. Tell her to shut it down before this gets any worse." Nora's voice was low but steady. "You never asked why she's doing it." "I don't need to. I know people like her. They want attention." The call cut off. Nora looked at me, guilt tightening her jaw. "Sorry, I didn't think she'd actually call." "It's okay," I said. "She's not calling me." 10 minutes later, a new email pinged into my inbox. From Charles Hollis. Subject: Legal boundary. Vivian. I regret that it's come to this, but your current actions are bordering on defamation and emotional harassment. You are publicly misrepresenting our family and crossing lines that are legally protected. Please consider this a formal notice. We urge you to cease these broadcasts immediately. The fire in my chest burned brighter than the one in front of me. I walked to the Haven portal, an old wooden frame Monica had hung between 2 pines, and pulled out the original letter. No edits, no highlights. I pinned it dead center. Even if we disagree, invite each other back every year. No child should be told they don't belong. I didn't speak, didn't make a video. I just stood there with the wind in my hair, watching the letter sway. Leah found me an hour later holding up her phone. "I just got word," she said. "Gather magazine wants the exclusive. They're calling it the anti-retreat. What do you think?" I looked past her at the fire, at the faces around it, at the soft weight of my grandmother's words above them all. "I think it's time they heard the story. I used to think I kept the letter to protect my memory. Now I understand. I kept it as a tool for release." The air was still when I stepped out, dew still hugging the blades of moss beneath my feet. A soft haze hung over the lake, catching the sunlight like it too, was hesitating before the day began. We had all agreed on silence for breakfast, not as a rule, but as a reverence. Words came too easily when they were angry. Hard truths, however, took stillness to emerge. I carried the letter with both hands like it was sacred. Folded 3 times, the creases were as much a part of it now as the words inside. I stood in the stone circle Monica and I had cleared days earlier, barefoot on the damp grass. Nora sat to my left, legs crossed, mug in hand. Grayson leaned against a tree just beyond the benches. Monica set down her camera quietly on the tripod, then nodded. I opened the letter. "My dear grandchildren," I began. "If you're reading this, it means you are still listening. Thank you." Each line was slow, like unwrapping something fragile. The guests around me leaned in with every word. Families do not exist to mirror perfection. They exist to endure imperfection, together. Even if we disagree, invite each other back every year. Because no bloodline grants you moral ground, it only gives you proximity. Love, not lineage, decides who belongs. My throat tightened, but I didn't stop. When I reached the part about forgiveness, the kind that isn't asked but is chosen, someone behind me sniffled. Melissa, the single mother who arrived in silence 2 days ago, was wiping her eyes. "My grandmother," she said, voice breaking, "was kicked out of her house for saying the same thing. She died without an apology." I folded the letter with trembling hands, but I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't moved, but because I had already cried for this. What remained was clarity. Later that day, Leah pulled me aside. "I stayed up all night editing the video," she said, eyes sparkling with adrenaline. "I'm calling it Retreat of the Rejected. You need to see this." She pressed play. There I was, in the circle, reading each line. But this time with footage overlaid. Nora carrying a tray of tea to the benches, Grayson hammering in a new bench post, Melissa hugging her daughter as the fire flickered. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about what we were building. We uploaded the video at 2:12 p.m. It reached 30,000 views by dinner. Somewhere between folding blankets and cleaning dishes, my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it. Another comment, I thought. But it wasn't a comment. It was a voicemail. From Linda Hollis. Her voice was hushed, short, careful even. "I didn't know you still had that letter." That was all. No greeting, no apology, no request to call back. Just an acknowledgement. And for once, it wasn't silence. They always hold retreats behind closed doors. I set up a stone circle in the middle of a meadow where no one gets interrupted. We cleared the final moss from the benches by noon. Grayson and Monica had dragged out the portable speakers, testing mics and checking camera angles, while I paced the edges of the meadow barefoot. The sun was strong but not scorching, casting dappled light through the maple trees that bordered the field. Wind carried the smell of soil and something almost like citrus, a note of newness. Today wasn't about confrontation. It was about clarity, the kind no one could cut off or delete. Leah stood beside me, eyes scanning the setup. "Echo Point's crew is on their way," she said, "and the YouTube team just finished setting up the drone." She lowered her voice, smiling. "Are you ready to become a quote-unquote figure?" I smirked. "I'm just a woman with a microphone in a field." We called it the public circle. 30 chairs in a wide ring, the open sky as ceiling, a short stone altar in the center bearing a vase of wildflowers and a single printed page, my grandmother's letter. The guests from Haven Retreat took their seats first, Melissa, Dr. Gian, Nora beside me. Monica manned the camera. Leah stepped forward to introduce the event. "We're here because some stories aren't just personal," Leah said. "They're systemic. When someone is left out of a family photo long enough, it stops being an oversight. It becomes erasure." Behind her, the letter lit up across a large screen we had hung between 2 trees. Line by line, it faded in. "Even if we disagree, invite each other back every year." I stood, walking slowly to the center. The mic felt warm in my hand from the sun, or maybe it was just the weight of the moment. I'm not here to name names, I began, voice steady. But I'm here to name patterns. Murmurs settled into silence. I was told there wasn't enough room, not because of logistics, but because of legacy. There's a difference. I looked toward the press section. A few nods. Cameras rolling. Some families inherit money. Some inherit silence. Mine? We inherited perfectionism, polished photos, curated toasts, a legacy that values loyalty to image over loyalty to truth. I paused. But truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs space. So here we are. The audience didn't clap. They breathed, like something had loosened. Leah stepped forward again, narrating the story behind the letter. When it was written, why it had been hidden. She didn't embellish. She didn't need to. The facts were enough. Then came the Q&A. A reporter from Echo Point, sandy hair, mid-30s, raised his hand. Vivian, he said, what has your family said in response to all this? I held his gaze, smiled, calm. I let them speak for themselves, with silence. Laughter rippled gently, not mocking, but with recognition, like they'd all been there. By dusk, the circle emptied, but the views didn't. Leah uploaded the speech to YouTube. The Haven stands open. Within hours, it hit 1 million views. By the next day, 2 million. Echo Point published a piece with a wide-angle photo of me in the meadow, arms crossed, wind catching my shirt. The headline read, "The Uninvited Architect, How Vivian Hollis Built What Her Family Wouldn't." I stared at it longer than I should have. It wasn't victory I felt. It was release. Until an email came in. Brittany. Subject line, "You're making this ugly. I suggest we speak. Privately." I walk into the mirrored room facing each other, the Hollis Retreat meeting room. They invite me. Finally. The glass doors closed behind me with a hush too deliberate, like even the air knew how much had been rehearsed. Everything in the room gleamed. The polished floors, the chrome fixtures, the vertical gold trims running up each wall like exclamation marks from another era. A long oval table split the room in half, flanked by 12 chairs, 10 of which sat empty. On the far side, Brittany stood near the window, arms crossed, mouth tight. Charles sat in one of the chairs, his posture perfectly rigid, the kind of poise he reserved for public announcements. Linda was by the mirrored wall, dabbing her temple with a monogrammed handkerchief, as if the reflection of all this made her sweat. Nora hovered to the side near a water cart, eyes on the carpet. I hadn't worn anything formal, just a soft navy blouse, jeans, and boots, still lined with Haven soil. I didn't knock. I didn't greet. I just stood there until Brittany spoke. "This isn't good for our family's image," she began, as if that were the only metric left. "What you're doing is spiraling into spectacle." I raised an eyebrow. Truth tends to draw attention when it's been suppressed long enough. Charles leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You're distorting what this family stands for. This." He gestured vaguely toward me. "This isn't the legacy your grandmother wanted." My pulse didn't quicken. Not anymore. "Is there any part of her letter," I asked, "that forbids the truth?" They froze. I took a few steps forward, pulled a folded envelope from my coat pocket, and placed it on the glass tabletop. She wrote it in '98. With this pen. I laid a fountain pen beside it. This is the original copy. Her signature's at the bottom, her handwriting, her folds. Brittany's lip twitched. "You can tear it up if you want," I said quietly. "Right here. Right now. I'll watch." No one moved. The letter sat there like a live wire. Linda looked up, her eyes glossy but not swollen. "This should never have gone public," she said softly, the words spilling out like a confession. "Some things They stay within the family. Unless you're not considered family, I replied, level. She said nothing. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The room, with its panels, its polish, its echoes, had no answers left. It only had mirrors. And in them, they were forced to look at themselves. I turned to leave. Nora stepped forward, quietly, without fanfare. She took my hand. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. I didn't break down that wall. I just pulled the curtains, let the light in. The morning the article dropped, I didn't even open my laptop. It was Monica who walked in holding her phone like it might combust. They published it, she said. Front feature. Title's brutal. She passed me the screen, a full-width photo stretched across the top. The Hollis estate glowing under harsh lighting, framed like a fortress. Beneath it, behind the gated retreat, an empire of appearances. I read in silence. I didn't need to brace myself. I already knew what was true. The piece didn't mention me until halfway through. It opened with quotes from former, uninvited attendees. Stories of being asked to leave if they didn't match the atmosphere, sponsors that offered photo-ready enhancements, even leaked emails where Brittany wrote, "Aesthetic continuity is essential." The journalists didn't editorialize, just laid the facts out like open books. Names, dates, quotes. One paragraph pulled from a rejected sponsorship proposal. We aim for partnerships that reflect the prestige of curated legacy, not contemporary disorder. In other words, exclusion as elegance. By 10 a.m., one sponsor had dropped. By noon, 3 more. That evening, the retreat's homepage went offline. I hadn't said a word. My most recent post was a single photograph, my hand resting on the Haven Circle stone, moss brushing my knuckles, the sky reflected faintly in the rock's damp grooves. The caption, "Still here." That night, Monica cracked open a bottle of cheap Prosecco. "To controlled burns," she said, clinking glasses with Leah. "Some forests need it to breathe again." Leah held up her phone. Also, not to make this about metrics, but Echo Point just listed Vivian as one of the 15 voices of 2024. I blinked. They did what? Leah turned the screen toward me. There it was, my face and profile, mid-sentence, from the public circle footage. The subhead, "The uninvited architect building a space for the silenced." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so I just sat down. Somewhere in the quiet, my phone buzzed. I let it ring once, then again. It was a message. From Linda. "I want to see Haven. Not for show. Just to see." For the first time, my mother comes with nothing but silence. It was still early when I saw her figure emerge through the fog, a dark coat cutting through the gray like a shadow trying not to disturb the morning. The ground was soft, mist clinging to the low grass, the kind that doesn't move when people walk. It just absorbs them. I didn't say anything. Neither did she. She walked with a purpose, but not confidence. Not the way she used to stride through retreats like an heirloom on display. This time, her steps had weight, as if each one took something from her. I sat on the low bench near the campfire ring, where only hours ago, a woman from Colorado had wept while reading a letter from her estranged son. The stones were still warm. The ashes in the pit hadn't scattered yet. Linda looked at them before settling on the flat slab across from me, the one I used to read the letter on. She didn't look around, didn't ask where the others were, didn't bring tea or towels or questions disguised as critiques. She sat. For maybe a full minute, she didn't speak. I waited. Let the silence stretch. It was the first time I realized silence could carry more than words. Finally, she asked quietly, "How did you keep the letter all these years?" The fog shifted behind her. I could see the outline of Nora walking with Monica further off, neither of them approaching. They knew this wasn't a moment to fill. I looked at my mother, not at her age, or her posture, or the designer buttons still sewn onto her sleeves, but at her eyes. Less defense, more searching. I answered, because it's the only part of the family I believe is real. She didn't flinch, didn't cry, just nodded once, small, barely there. Her hands were clasped together in her lap like she was holding something delicate. Maybe herself. We didn't talk after that. There was nothing else I needed to say, and nothing she could offer that wouldn't feel too late. When she stood to leave, she reached into her bag and pulled out a soft brown leather album, a little worn at the edges, as if it had lived in the back of a drawer for decades. She placed it on the stone slab, in the exact spot where I had once unfolded my grandmother's letter. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. I waited until the mist swallowed her form before reaching for the album. Inside, on the very first page, was a photo I had never seen before. I was 10, kneeling in a field of bluebells, holding a wooden sign that read, "Welcome all." My smile was missing teeth, but not courage. On the album cover, in her handwriting, it should have always included you. This year, I didn't ask if anyone was coming. I just opened the gate and let everyone see that there's always room for truth. Late spring in Vermont smells like beginnings. Wet bark, distant lilac, moss clinging to stone. It doesn't rush. It just arrives. That's how the final day of Haven Retreat felt. Not like a conclusion, but a season choosing to stay a little longer. The last of the returners stood in a quiet circle, their backpacks slung loosely, shoes damp from the grass. There were no name tags, no sign-in tables, just space, intentional space. Monica handed me the folded letter, the original. The corners had curled slightly like it had exhaled. I walked to the center of the circle, past the wildflowers that now grew in confident patches, and unfolded it one last time. Every gathering must leave space for the unexpected, I read. No one clapped, no one needed to. A boy, no more than 8, stood by a stone bench, watching the sunlight dance on the nearby lake. He didn't know the politics, the pain, the exclusions. But he smiled when I smiled. That was enough. Someone, I don't even know who, asked, "Will you continue next year?" I didn't hesitate. Not me, us. Leah caught it on camera. Of course she did. She had the gift of recording truth without interfering with it. Monica stepped forward, cradling a small flat stone. She had painted one word on it in thin charcoal ink. Proof. She placed it beside the others. Each stone had been laid by a guest. No names, just intent. Haven is not a place, she said softly. It's proof. That line lingered in the air longer than any wind could carry. People began to leave. Quiet goodbyes, shared glances, nods that said, "I'll carry this with me." I didn't walk them out. I stayed behind. One by one, the circle emptied, leaving only the memory of what had been spoken inside it. I took one final walk along the perimeter. No fence, no markers, just the imprint of stories, of shoes that dared step in, of moss that refused to be scraped away. By the gate, the boy turned and waved once more before disappearing down the trail with his mother. I didn't wave back. I just stood there and let the light land where it wanted. My story is over. But Haven has just begun. They told her there wasn't enough room, so she built a place with no walls at all. In trying to erase her, they carved their own names into the shame of exclusion, while she let truth take root and speak for itself. Justice didn't arrive in fury. It came in stillness, in the echo of one letter read aloud before the world. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. Sometimes, reclaiming your place doesn't mean returning. It means making sure no one else gets pushed out the way you were. No gate can keep out the truth once it learns how to walk. Have you ever been told there wasn't space for you, only to realize the absence said more about them than it ever did about you? If this story echoed something in your own life, I hope it reminded you. You don't need permission to exist. You don't need a seat at their table to build your own circle. Share your story in the comments, because someone else out there might need to know they're not alone. Like, subscribe, and send this to anyone who's ever had to choose truth over tradition. Because sometimes the most radical thing you can do is stay exactly as you are and still open the door.